Ford Australia introduced a V8 engine option into its Australian-made Ford Falcon range in 1966. In 1982, it killed the V8 engine option in Falcon because of increasing environmental concerns, the march of technology, and the fuel crisis of the 1970s. As it turned out, killing the V8 engine option was a bit of a mistake. It removed that halo of performance that a V8 engine option gave the whole Falcon range. In 1991, Ford Australia corrected that mistake by reintroducing a V8 engine option in Falcon. And the best example of that option is in this, the Falcon S XR8. Ford's new V8 engine option was imported from America. When Ford dropped its V8 engine option in Australia in 1982, it actually shut down the manufacturing facilities for the V8 engine. Lucky for Ford Australia, the engine option continued in America in the Ford Mustang. So when Ford Australia decided it needed a V8 again in the early 1990s, it went shopping for the engine in the USA. Something else that was lucky for Ford Australia with reintroducing a V8 engine option was the fact that the EB Falcon, what we have here, was loosely based on the 1970s and the 1980s Falcons. Those Falcons had a V8 engine option, so the engine bay architecture in this model car, the new Falcon for the 1990s, could easily accept the V8 engine. There was plenty of fresh tech underneath the EA Falcon too, including brand new front suspension, overhead cam engines and rack and pinion steering. And it's all set off by this wonderful styling. Australian car stylists always seem to do a great job making a big car look smaller. In the 1980s, aerodynamics became a driving force in car styling and car design. The Falcon uses aerodynamics in this lovely smooth bonnet, a laid-back windscreen, flush-mounted door handles. So, what's it go like? You've got to cast your mind back, or you've got to realise that in 1991, you weren't able to do this. This was the first time you could buy a new Ford V8 for nearly a decade. So it was a significant car. Okay, with 165 kilowatts, it wasn't actually a world beater, but it was a Ford Falcon V8 you could buy brand new from your Ford dealer for the first time in 10 years. Of course, the Ford Falcon S XR8, the Falcon V8, wasn't the only Aussie V8 performance sedan you could buy back in the day. Holden had sold lots of its SS Commodore, fitted with its freshly fuel-injected V8 from 1989. And it was that car, that model, that Holden V8, that actually forced Ford into reintroducing the V8 into this car. The XR8 and of course the SS lasted right until the end of Australian car manufacture in 2016 for the Ford and 2017 for the Commodore. Unfortunately, the EA Falcon of 1988, which is what this car was based on, wasn't a very good bit of gear. Ford almost had bitten off more than it could chew with a new engine, a new body shell and all new suspension in the one car. It was a big job to get this car to market, to get this car developed. Ford had to work very hard to sort out all those quality issues to make this car as good as it was. By 1991, most of the problems were sorted out, and of course, the V8 was back. This generation Falcon had a whole brand new front suspension under it, known as a Slales system, short, long arm, long spindle. It was a far more sophisticated system than the 1970s and 1980s Falcons. And the cherry on the pie was four-wheel disc brakes. This was the first generation Ford to have four-wheel disc brakes specified as standard. So it had to stop to match the go. I can remember the joy of people back in the day when this car was relaunched. I'm almost crying now. Wow, just magnificent. This particular car we're driving today is a lovely example. 165,000 Ks on this thing, so there's plenty of life left in this old girl. There's a little bit of wind noise, there's a couple of little rattles in the interior, but man, it's like 32 years old. But the owner of this car is going to keep it pretty much forever. Lovely classic cruiser. Now, these things weren't blisteringly quick back in the day, but the Ford V8 was easily a match for the Commodore SS. In fact, the Ford V8 was a slightly more drivable car. It had a little bit more urge down low, which meant at street speeds, it was actually a little bit more lively. But at the drag strip, there was not much in it. The cars were pretty much line ball. For the first time in Australian car history, Holden and Ford had almost perfectly matched model ranges. So a new Falcon S XR8. Big news in 1991. Good news for Ford enthusiasts. Good news for the Australian performance car enthusiast. But it wasn't the only good news. The quickest Aussie car you can buy. That was the boast of Wheels magazine in, I think, October 1992, talking about this car, the XR6. Now, this car's an automatic, so it's not as quick as the manual, but back in the day, the new Falcon XR6 out-accelerated every other V8 production car made in Australia. Aussies have always talked about V8s but driven 6s, and Tickford with this car gave us a 6 that was really worth driving. Yeah, it gets on with it even for an automatic. The automatic in these was a 4-speed auto like the rest of the Falcon range, and also like the equivalent Holden Commodore S. Big car, big cabin, the same comfy seats as the XR8, the nicely contoured side bolstered seats which held you in place when you were driving hard. There was less weight over the nose of the car, and that made the steering a bit sharper. It made the car a bit more nimble. It made it, if anything, a little bit more satisfying to drive. The Ford EA of 1988 was available with 3 engines. A 3.2 litre and 2 3.9s. The standard Ford Falcon had 148 kilowatts. This, the SXR6, had 161. As I mentioned earlier, that was only a handful of horsepowers less than the XR8. But being lighter and being a bit revvier made this car the faster car. Driving an XR6 is the same but different to driving an XR8. Of course, being a 6, it doesn't have that lovely low-down throb of the 5-litre V8 in the Falcon XR8. This has got more of a Euro feel, especially given that this first model XR6 had a few more interior refinements to the XR8. There's a leather steering wheel in front of me. I think it's a Momo actually, but it's a lovely wheel to grip. It's a lovely wheel to hang off. The seats are the same as the XR8, which is a terrific asset to this car. And the suspension in this car is firmer. My memory of the day is the fact that the XR6 had slightly firmer suspension than the XR8. I really love these 90s Falcons. I love the 90s Commodores too, don't get me wrong, but these things are great. They're just big, tough and simple. They've obviously survived the test of time over the last 30 years or so. A good one is worth finding, a good one is worth fixing up, a good one is worth keeping. These 2 cars that I've driven today, the XR8 and the XR6, were pretty much the start of a great wave of Australian performance cars. Of course, Holden had its fuel-injected V8 a couple of years beforehand, but this was the first fight back from Ford. This was the first, shot across the bows of Holden with first the XR8 and then the XR6. I've said it before and I'll say it again, it was the start of this terrific era in Aussie performance. I'm so glad I lived through it, I really am, and I'm so glad that there's still quite a few of these cars out there for people like us to buy, collect and cruise. So, what would you choose? The reintroduced Ford Falcon V8, shown here in the SXR8, or the more Euro-inspired Tickford SXR6, 4 litres of brawny, quick 6. Let us know what you prefer in the comments below. While you're there, like and subscribe and check out retrorides.com.au for the full story on these two iconic Australian cars. I'm Glenn Torrens, this has been Retro Rides and I'll see you in the next episode.